Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Saturday, October 18th, 2025. I hope you've got your Halloween costumes all sorted out. Halloween candy is very expensive this year, and I don't think that's an accident. I noticed chocolate increasing in price a lot in mid-end of the summer, etc. And it's only getting more expensive, so it's very interesting to watch. But they're squeezing out lots of money for Halloween, and I think they're trying to make it too expensive for people to continue. Like people are going to be like, oh, that Halloween thing, we're not going to do that. I think it's a soft cultural attack, but I'm just speculating. The United Nations carbon tax was stopped by Team Trump, and we're going to start there because it has to do with trade and China and a whole bunch of other stuff, and I think it's all kind of intertwined, and I think that the worldwide carbon tax being implemented by the United Nations is certainly of Canadian concern if you want to be up on what's going on, so I think we're going to start there. Poilievre's talking about SNC-Lavalin. 5 years too late. SNC, like, wasn't it 2018, 2019 when this whole scandal was hitting? Jody Wilson-Raybould, and we wouldn't need a new attorney general if Scott Bryson hadn't resigned, and all sorts of crazy stuff. This is a decade old scandal now, and Poilievre is bringing this up. But yeah, it matters, and the Sam Cooper saying it's current, and what's going on then, what happened then impacts now. And again, I don't think he's all that incorrect there. 1,000 RCMP officers can't even be hired and trained because the current configuration can barely keep up with the attrition, the leaving officers being replaced with new ones. It can't, 1,000 new officers, we can't get 10 new officers because of the rate we're losing officers and the rate we can train them. So pretty wild, right? Nordstream pipeline investigation dies, and gun confiscation program has been shelved for another year. They'll have more amnesty until next year. Thank you very much. Vote for the Liberals again. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We're going to be starting with Trump. And what did Trump do? Trump derailed the United Nations' ability to unilaterally impose taxes on the whole world. And according to this guy, he says that the U.S. aid funding, which was going to fund all sorts of conflicts, both sides of conflicts, was going to be that Trump shut that down, right? This fund, this United Nations carbon tax fund, was meant to replace it, right? That U.S. aid funding. So John says, I can't share the details on how Michael Waltz and Secretary Rubio have, in just a few days, organized the greatest opposition to the United Nations policy since the Cold War and blocked this United Nations carbon tax. I can't say it was a knife fight to the end. Or I can say it was a knife fight to the end. Quote, I've been in this industry 30 years and I've never seen anything like it. One shipping executive told me today, you just don't say no to these guys. It's unheard of. It's unclear who these guys are, but I suspect the European families with shipping investments and net wealth that far exceeds Elon Musk's. Think Zim. Right? Zim's a shipping manufacturer that's just massive. They also moved their offices out of 9/11 on 9/10. So weird, right? Just weird coincidence, weird thing to do, but I digress. Absolutely none of the maritime experts I interviewed early this week thought the U.S. could pull this off. Zero. Massive amounts of money, NGO influence, diplomatic threat, media manipulation were behind this, and the American media, except this one and Fox News, were dead silent, and yet Trump did it. That Trump truth post sent shockwaves through the building. One UN delegate in London told me nobody expected it. The Secretary General looked like a deer in headlights this morning. Incredible. Simply incredible work by Team Trump, and a massive blow to the European deep state who plan to use this tax as a slush fund to plug holes in the U.S. aid funding for globalist NGOs. Promises made, promises kept. So yeah, the globalist NGOs seem to be having holes blown in their lifeboat, and Canada keeps handing them patches and pumps and all sorts of stuff. And then Canada tries to tell us that they're, I don't know, helping somehow, but I don't think so. I don't think that's what they're doing. Unusual Wales is noting there's trade disputes happening between China and the China and the United States. And because of these trade tensions, things seem to be, well, you can feel it in the air, right? There's a little tension in the air. And the United States wants rare earth metals, and they want a reliable stream of rare earth metals, and they used to get them from China, and China is now locking those down and has said as much. And Trump said this is effectively a fiscal attack. We're gonna deal with this in a fiscal way, And so China has tried to soften their opinion or soften their position, but Trump has not. And Trump is, in fact, doubling and tripling down. And Unusual Whales says, U.S. trade officials, China's taking actions as though they want to decouple. And I want to remind you, and I'm going to remind you in just a second, that decoupling from China, Trump used this in his first term as language in his first term. So I don't know if this is Team Trump manipulating and taking the lead on telling the story, right? Taking the narrative, or what? Unusual Whales says the U.S. has drafted countermeasures if negotiations fail with China. So here's just a little bit of going back in time. The Harvard Business Review is talking in 2021 about the strategic challenges of decoupling with China. And it says, for U.S. politicians and the public, shortages of N95 masks and other key medical equipment at the beginning of the coronavirus crisis highlighted just how dependent the United States had become on production in China. The Trump administration's aggressive policy toward China was broadly popular, despite potential negative side effects. In the first 10 months of 2020, the exact phrase decouple from China or decoupling from China appeared in 3 times as many articles as in the previous 3 years combined. So this was at the beginning of 2020. Trump was in charge of the U.S. until oh wait, maybe not. Biden, was it Biden? So this was a Biden era. Decoupling from China would be Biden. Trump would only be in charge until January 21st in 2020, and then Biden's in, right? And so, or does Biden start in 2021? My gosh, I can't remember. Either way, they're using this language, and this is a return to that language. Okay, so I thought that was an interesting point, and I'm sorry that I can't remember which way that works. Darn, because they say the 2020 election. And then Biden would have started in 21, right? Yeah. So that's Trump's language returning to Trump's language, which is what I thought. Okay. Gov.exe says, sorry, everyone. This is more focused on Canadian trade, but this is Mel Jolie talking about dealing with trade and Trump, and they're clear-eyed on what needs to be done. But we've heard the same kind of story before. It doesn't seem like they're clear-eyed on what needs to be done. It seems like, I mean, I understand what needs to be done. Put dairy on the table. Stop being stupid and stop undermining the United States' position out with the rest of the world and with the rest of the G7. And then maybe we'll get somewhere. But until we start acting more in line with good faith partners, we're not going to make any headway because we're not acting like people who can be trusted, right? So anyway, here's Mel Jolie talking about Trump, and there's a question with regards to how the trade negotiations are going. And so here we go.
For me to answer your questions. Okay, you're not saying specifically at the border, you mean the trade tensions. Okay. Well, I think what you saw last week was a positive conversation, a respectful one. We're eyes wide open, and we understand the task that is extremely real and important for Canadians to be able to solve. That's why the Minister of Canada Trade Relations, Dominic LeBlanc, is in Washington with Michael Sabia, the clerk of the Privy Council, and they will let the negotiations continue. Meanwhile, we can protect, we can create, and we can attract to build one strong economy. Because at the end of the day, there are things we can't control, there are things we can control, so we'll focus on what we can control.
I don't think that they are focused on things they can control. They're doing things pretending that they can control Canadians' market for electric cars and things like that. They're pretending that, well, they are trying to implement their will, pretending that they can control us at a very, very micro level, control us, the population. And I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that's pretty brutal. Rhonda says, Mark Carney promised 1,000 new CBSA agents, but even the union president says it's not going to happen. So this is the details on what I was talking about before. Here we go.
Considering you started your testimony with commending the current government on a promise, and the promise was 1,000 border agents, and you said that was a strong start. Given that, what would your vision be then for how soon that obligation could be fulfilled?
Thank you for the question. Right now, I do not believe it can really be fulfilled. We have one training center that can train under 600 new officers per year, which is about what our attrition is per year. So there's no way you get 1,000 additional from that. My understanding is that there's a $20 million proposal with the CBSA to expand the training facility in Chilliwack. My understanding is also that is on hold. It has not been approved. I've heard talks of expansions at Rigaud. I know there was ideas of spots that were available in Windsor as well, but so far we're just stuck with that one training center. So I don't know how we're going to get our numbers up right now.
Okay, thank you. So you're not sure how we're going to get the numbers up. Neither are we. In previous testimony, we've seen that really the plan hasn't really even started yet as to how that's going to happen. There's been a lot of talk. Would you say that, given that the process of creating a plan to hire those 1,000 agents, is it fair to say that it's a bit of a pie in the sky promise?
Pie in the sky would be an expression that could be used. I think it might be a little bit more long than short term in terms of achievability. I think the CBSA is looking at perhaps not hiring 1,000 additional full border services officers, but hiring lesser positions, downloading duties onto newly created FB1 positions that they are deeming administrative, we are very concerned to actually do the work of a border services officer. We have the CBSA now is undergoing a review of accommodated officers who cannot be armed, where they're essentially telling them that you are going to self-demote or we're going to show you the door. These are in many instances people who've injured themselves on the job. That's how our employer is treating them right now. It's deplorable, but it looks really like just a cost-saving measure. So we're really concerned when we hear 1,000. We want to make sure that that's 1,000 actual border services officers.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Wow. So it's not even just that they're not going to hire 1,000 border service guards. They're going to hire somebody else and get them to do the border service guard job for less. So our government is a very, very bad employer, right? If there was a glass door for government jobs, is there a glass door for government jobs? There might be. Glass door is like you rate your employer, and you can do it open or closed. I think you can give them a rating, and you don't have to give your name publicly, I think. Although that could be wrong. That could be outdated information. I don't go on Glassdoor very often. I just know of it. So anyway, who knows? But wild. Here is the food professor, and he says the car industry is hurting, and so is food manufacturing. Our economy is being strangled, held underwater. It's not dead yet, but it's making eye contact and like meaningfully saying, help me out of the water. Otherwise, the whole economy is going to be, right? And so it's not good where we're at. And America's economy is doing quite well. Canada's economy is not doing very well at all. And that's not great. And it's because of bad investments. The government has spent billions of dollars meant to return a lot of money to the economy in the form of jobs, in the form of product that will be then sold, and that company can churn more jobs and things like that, right? Because if you make something and nobody buys it, then you don't have a business. You just have a bunch of junk you made. But if you make something and people buy it and they want more and they need service on it and all this other stuff, now you've got a soup, right? Now you've got things cooking and things are going to actually go on. And our government puts money into Potemkin villages. Potemkin villages are like pretend cutout villages that look like they're real villages from far away, or if you look at them from a specific angle. But if you do any amount of investigative work, you find out that it's fake, right? It doesn't exist at all. Like the buildings behind Mark Carney when he was announcing all those housing things, the housing initiatives and stuff, all of that was fake, like that. So our government invests in things. So what's supposed to happen is the government spends $13 million, and that $13 million turns into $100 million of economic activity, right? And all that $13 million is justified because of $100 million of economic activity that happened around that, right? So that includes things like restaurants to serve the plant, or things like that, like restaurants nearby where people go for lunch. That's somebody's whole livelihood, right? right? Can be. And so all of that economic activity is worth that $13 million investment for all of that action, right? And so, but that's not happening when you invest money into a battery plant that just moves to the United States like Brookfield did. And Brookfield is, of course, Mark Carney's old company that he was the CEO for. He moved them to the United States and then he became the Prime Minister of Canada. For sure. Definitely nothing suspect there. Anyway, Aaron Gunn says, here's more examples of bad spending and bad policies on our government's behalf. Aaron says, seriously? The Liberal government is now spending $3 million of taxpayer money to subsidize female farmers in Nicaragua because climate change? Many Canadians are struggling just to make ends meet. Wasteful spending like this needs to end. So we are spending a whole bunch of money, and the return on the money for Canadians, what do we get? As a Canadian, as a dude in my garage, doing all the things that I like to do, what do I get for spending this $3 million for female Nicaraguan farmers? Why? What? Are the female Nicaraguan farmers in Nicaragua or are they in Canada? I need to ask, are they in hotels in Canada? Because if so, that's a different thing altogether. I can understand how that relates to Canada somehow. Franco says, everybody across the country should be concerned about what's going on with our government and their ability to, or their handle on finances, because they don't seem to have a handle on finances. Here's these guys.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I think everyone across the country should be concerned, right? Because the numbers we're looking at, like I've been with the Parliamentary Budget Office for the past 17 years. Before that, I spent like over 10 years putting together budgets in the Department of Finance and the Bank of Canada and the Treasury Board. And it's a really challenging situation where, again, if we stick with the status quo, we're in a situation where things won't naturally get better on their own. And that's why we indicated, like, everyone, like the current forecast, the baseline forecast, not including the additional spending that isn't really concrete at this point, but the directions the government has indicated they want to go in, it definitely raises concerns regarding sustainability. And I think like for a lot of folks, like they know, like you manage a household budget, you have to make decisions, and you know that, okay, 1 year to the next or 1 month to the next, you might have an unexpected expense. You might have to borrow a bit of money, take down some of your money, cash out of savings, borrow some money from a friend or a neighbor, something from a line of credit. And you expect that, okay, well, I'll be able to pay it back, right? So I'll be able to save a little bit more, like scrimp a little bit on vacation or so, what have you. So you'll end up in a better situation where the money's paid back and you're definitely operating in a sustainable way. And so for us, looking at the baseline it's before the government tables the budget on November 4th, the current baseline we're on definitely raises concerns regarding sustainability. And on our end, we certainly anticipate that the government is going to be making announcements leading up to the budget, and certainly as part of the budget, that are going to address that.
Sustainability and the Canadian spending, the proclivity for our leaders to just spend money we don't even have on things that don't work, like these projects that Anita Anand is trying to sell. And I don't believe, well, Kirk says Foreign Affairs Minister Anand says there are 10 national large projects that people are wanting to sign on to. And he says, are these 10 projects in the room with us right now? Right? So the only thing announced are 5 projects that have been in the works for years already. So these are fictional. And if they're not fictional, please produce some kind of evidence.
I'm not sure if you've heard, but we have 10 large national projects, including wind, including LNG, including nuclear energy with the development of an SMR at the Darlington nuclear plant. Countries around the world are asking how they can invest in these projects, and we welcome the interest.
SMRs have already not worked in Australia. And if they're not working in Australia, they're sure as heck not working in Canada. It's just not going to happen. We are at 19 minutes. Should we start? Okay. Michelle is talking about, yesterday they're attacking Pierre Poilievre for talking about the SNC-Lavalin stuff. And here's the RCMP guy saying, we investigated our SNC-Lavalin and there was nothing to see there. And Pierre Poilievre's a silly goose. And isn't he dumb? LOL, LOL. Right? And it's interesting because Michelle says, she forgot the follow-up question. Who appointed you? Who do you directly report to? The Liberal Prime Minister, the one standing right behind you, right here, right? You can't see his terrible teeth, but he's right there. The conflict of interest is unbelievable. Just waiting for Jody Wilson-Raybould to weigh in. And so people are upset because Tokyo Rosie highlights this. The RCMP had enough evidence to charge Justin Trudeau with fraud in the Aga Khan scandal, but didn't. Canada's legacy media had a huge story to investigate, but didn't. There's been a sustained effort by Canada's institutions to keep Trudeau out of jail. Why? Well, he's the Prime Minister, so the institutions are protecting him, and I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that's the nature of the party's going to protect him. Parliament. If people think that the Prime Minister's a criminal, they're going to lose faith in the government, right? So that's a national security issue. We've got to make sure, the public thinks this, not that, right? And so that would be why. That would be what they're protecting, if you ask me. Here is 401. And he says, Pierre was right. The RCMP confirms Trudeau obstructed the investigation. This is 6.5 minutes. This is from Michael Cooper, who's sharing this October 17th. So that's yesterday. He says, Justin Trudeau broke the law in SNC and abused his power to cover it up. Watch the RCMP confirm that Trudeau obstructed the investigation into his criminal wrongdoing. And Chrissy says, Justin Trudeau should be in jail, not on a yacht with Katy Perry. He obstructed. I was going to make a Dylan Mulvaney joke there. I saw a meme that said AI, whatever, something had looked at this image and determined that it wasn't actually Justin Trudeau, or it wasn't actually Katy Perry. It was Dylan Mulvaney that Justin Trudeau was hugging, and I thought that was pretty funny. Regardless, back to this. Justin Trudeau should be in jail. He obstructed the investigation to his own criminal wrongdoings. The proof is out. Lock him up. And yeah. Is anything going to happen right after we fix the 2020 election in the United States? All of this is going to be dealt with. So any day now. Of course, I'm kidding. But, right after the biolabs in Ukraine get exposed and dealt with, we're going to have a digital prison before any of this happens. I mean, come on, guys, right? This is a situation where they're not interested in putting bad people in jail for breaking the law. They're interested in implementing their digital gulag tax farm that they can just bilk off for the rest of eternity. It seems like that's the game here. Sam Cooper says, oh man, we should kill the stream, but I'm having too much fun. Sam Cooper says, I agree with this take. And Alan says, there's no doubt that there was a serious wrongdoing in the SNC-Lavalin affair. Well, I think that's an understatement. An obvious disinterest in investigating it among the senior ranks of the RCMP. Nothing to see there. Everybody knows that the RCMP gets super disinterested when you have to investigate anything, related to government, right? So move on, citizen, right? Totally fine, Alan. Okay. I just don't think Canadians, given all the challenges they're facing today, because of the issues today, we can't go back and deal with all of the criminality of yesterday that we know happened. Obviously, that's a crazy thing, and we should focus on today. Okay. They're facing today are much interested in retaliating or relitigating yesterday's scandal. It's not a winning issue for the CPC. Well, I agree it's not a winning issue necessarily for the CPC. To say SNC-Lavalin happened and holy cow, we just noticed it. That's definitely a losing issue for the CPC. But possibly going after the people who did that criminally might be a winning issue because it'll signal you're willing to do something, for crying out loud. Did you notice the full-blown invasion of the country? The CPC? No? Oh my gosh. Sam Cooper says, I agree with this take. Canadians don't care. It's ancient history. By the same token, to the extent Ottawa media even matters anymore, the gaslighting, i.e. couch fainting, how dare he claim the RCMP can't investigate leaders, is pathetic. Sam Cooper says, I'm saying it's a concern. It's a present concern, not a past concern. And the Ottawa columnists and political insiders, for various reasons, don't want it to be a concern. But Alan is correct that SNC-Lavalin, absent some new explosive leaks, won't move the needle. Explosive leaks like arrests? Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau were arrested on SNC-Lavalin charges. Katy Perry, accessory after the fact. She was aware, right? So that would create some buzz. That would create something. I'm kidding, but I'm just saying we could create all the buzz we need. Canadian Border Services Agency is taking action to protect our economy. The CBSA is investigating whether certain imports of disposable paper plates and bowls and platters from China are being sold at unfair prices in Canada, being dumped or subsidized, like that Australian beef. Shove says, and he's an MP, I believe, Conservative Member of Parliament for Calgary Heritage, and he says, paper plates, not fentanyl, not secure borders, not stopping illegal guns from coming into our country, paper plates. That's the important border issue of the day for the Liberals, right? So that's, if only we knew how bad it really is, right? Like, that's terrible. And 401 says CBSA officers will investigate disposable paper plate and bowls, not the fentanyl precursors getting dumped into Canada for super labs in BC and Ontario, which are operating at full throttle as we speak, not the meth we ship to Australia and New Zealand, killing people. Oh, plates. Plates are the important thing here, and not SNC-Lavalin. Nobody's interested in that scandal, right? This current scandal of plates and New Zealand meth and beer and fentanyl, all of these current scandals also don't matter. Nobody's interested in them either, Alan. Nobody's interested in anything, it seems. Larry Brock says Carney's new bail plan is nothing more than smoke and mirrors until the Liberals repeal Bill C-75, principle of restraint. Violent repeat offenders will keep walking free, and Canadians will keep paying the price. And so I think it's funny because Larry Brock and the Conservatives voted for C-5, which got around Bill C-69, which is the No More Pipelines bill. And in doing that, they were saying that we can ignore this bad bill, C-69, and have policies that override this bad bill in some cases. But in this one, he's saying until this bill, C-75, is repealed, you can't fix it. Until Bill C-69 is repealed, C-5 is not going to fix it. I just think it's funny. And with that, we got to say goodbye to the stream. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. And if not, that's okay. We'll see you tomorrow. And for everybody else, we will carry on as soon as I kill the stream. I'm done. And good. So we'll carry on. We've got our grab bag of governance coming up, so that's always fun. Bruce says, can someone tell our clueless public safety minister that his government legalized fentanyl possession in British Columbia? 2.5 grams of fentanyl is legal to carry in British Columbia. Can you believe that? So 2 milligrams of fentanyl is enough to kill somebody. Being able to legally carry 2.5 grams of fentanyl is enough to kill 1,250 people. Far more dangerous than any gun. That's true. It's really true. It's not very good. Pierre Poilievre is responding to this, and it's so the comparison to a gun is interesting. They're calling for the resignation of Anna Sangri, but replacing him is not going to do anything because the same people run the government that put him in place, and he's doing the job they want him to do. Otherwise, he'd be moved out of the position. It's as simple as that. So it's not going to work. I don't think people are going to be moved out of position because people don't like Anna Sangri or whatever's going on. Pierre Poilievre is responding to Public Safety Canada, and Public Safety Canada is announcing the amnesty period to protect licensed owners and businesses in professions of the prohibited assault-style firearms while they take steps to comply with the law has been extended to October 30th, 2026. And Poilievre says the Liberals promised this boondoggle of a program 5 years ago and now have extended the amnesty for the third time. Now gun crime is up 130% under the Liberals because they chose to attack lawful hunters and sport shooters instead of locking up gangsters and gun smugglers. Sign the petition. And I haven't seen a petition garner any kind of positive or society positive, like the government. I haven't seen the petitions do anything. The petitions have not been in a situation where I think to myself, yeah, that petition really changed the needle on that. I don't think so. I haven't seen one example. Sonia is running for Calgary mayor, and she says the majority of Calgarians were not in favor of blanket rezoning. I voted against it in 23 before it even became a policy. The community's first term the community's first team and I will repeal blanket rezoning on day one. I will ensure neighborhood voices are brought back to council. So I don't know when the Calgary election is, but hopefully somebody with sense gets put in, but I'm not holding my breath. Things seem pretty senseless these days. Juno News is reporting CBC's 5-year plan includes race-based hiring targets and diversity quotas. Yay! In a move sparking questions about its mandate and use of tax dollars, CBC has announced a new diversity quota in its 5-year corporate plan, aiming for 30% of its creative and leadership roles to be filled by racialized or Indigenous employees by 2026. What's the percentage of Indigenous people in Canada? It's under like 10%, isn't it? I'm sure it's under 10%. And I think it's even under 5%. So like, if you look at just the sheer numbers of people, right? Like racialized, a whole bunch of racialized people keep coming into the country. So the percentage of racialized people keeps growing every year, where the percentage of Indigenous, I don't think it keeps growing every year. And so that's interesting to me. The target outlined in the public broadcaster's 25-26 corporate plan summary, linked there, is one of the few measurable commitments in a document otherwise dominated by broad goals around equity, inclusion, and accessibility. CBC says the benchmark applies across all its platforms, including television, radio, and digital media. In the plan, the state broadcaster said it would maintain annual tracking of workforce representation against national labor market availability benchmarks for equities-seeking groups, with a goal of meeting or exceeding those benchmarks in every occupational category. It added that it will link executive performance reviews to progress on EDI outcomes and require inclusive recruitment and anti-bias training for all hiring managers by 2025. Anti-bias training. They train bias into you. The report also pledges to expand mentorship and training programs for Indigenous and racialized employees, increase partnerships with post-secondary institutions, and make accessibility standards mandatory for all new digital products starting in 2025. Under the plan, CBC will conduct biannual inclusion surveys. Biannual inclusion surveys? How much does that cost? And continue to publish annual progress reports tracking representation among 5 designated groups: women, Indigenous people, racialized Canadians, persons with disabilities, and members of the SL2G, whatever it is, community. CBC Radio Canada reaffirmed its commitment to achieve gender parity, stating it aims to maintain or exceed 50% female representation in key creative roles. Womp womp. So CBC is not going to get defunded. It is going to be a ambassador of woke to the masses, right? My gosh. Here is Ezra Levent asking the minister, health minister, about the ostriches. The health minister stays silent.
Thank you, Minister, for agreeing to accredit Rebel News. I very much appreciate your dedication to freedom of the press. I have a question about the ostrich farm. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask about the lawsuit because I don't want you to talk about anything that are before the courts. But there was a letter, and I noticed in the statement you talk about Canada-U.S. cooperation. I know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your U.S. counterpart, has written saying he thinks that there's some medical research value in these ostriches because they had avian flu, but then have recovered and are now immune. In fact, he's offered to do the research and even to pay for it. It seems to me that we need allies around Trump's cabinet table. And if you could throw him a bone and say, sure, Secretary Kennedy, you can study these birds, it's sort of no skin off Canada's nose. And don't you think it would be helpful to have an ally in Trump's cabinet when we're doing our trade negotiations?
Prochaine question, merci.
That's my question. Don't you think it would be helpful to have a friend?
Next reporter, merci.
Oh, you're not going to answer, Minister?
Prochaine question, merci.
I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?
Next question, thank you.
Minister, did I miss an answer? I don't get it. Okay, I'll sit down. It's I guess it's question period, not answer period.
Merci beaucoup.
Weird. I don't think I'd give them the out, right? Question period, not answer period. Ho, ho, ho. They work for us. They're public servants. They should damn well answer questions when asked by the press. John McAfee News says Trump concludes his meeting with Zelensky and calls it very interesting and cordial, then highlights how this war must end. To me, it sounds like Trump told Zelensky the war is going to end, and Zelensky's not happy about it. Trump wants this war over. And so Trump says, the meeting with President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine was very interesting and cordial, but I told him, as I likewise strongly suggested to President Putin, that it's time to stop the killing and make a deal. Enough blood has been shed, with property lines being defined by war and guts. They should stop where they are. Let both claim victory. Let history decide. No more shooting, no more death, no more vast and unsustainable sums of money spent. This is a war that would have never started if I were president. Thousands of people are being slaughtered each and every week. No more. Go home to your families in peace. That's all caps in the last sentence. So Trump trying to make peace, publicly talking about what's going on with Putin, what's going on with Zelensky. We've got a peace summit next week between Putin and Russia and Trump. He was talking. There was talk of a decision on where the meeting was going to take place, and they did say a name. It starts with a B, I think, but I can't remember the name. So apologies about that. Wyatt says Poland and Italy have both blocked the extradition of Nordstream suspects to Germany, meaning the criminal investigation is effectively closed. In Europe, trials are like their elections now. They only happen when Brussels can guarantee the outcome. So it's pretty incredible. Why Mike Benz says, holy cow, they let the Nord Stream pipeline bomber go and closed the case to protect Ukraine and the Biden CIA. Yep, they sure did. And again, it's like national security. They broke the law. And so the system, if people know that and they acknowledge it, then people might lose faith in the system. This is national security, so they have to protect it. So they're not going to let anything happen that might undermine national security like that. And it's a bullshit excuse, but I'm pretty sure that's why they're doing it. Here is politics of fear on display in the EU. Che says the EU is obsessed with fear, a drone defense initiative, Eastern Flank Watch, air shield, and a space shield. Where's the immigration shield? Cost of living shield, the corruption shield, everything is Russia's fault, even the bad weather. And so, yeah, there is low-hanging fruit. There is fruit rotting on the ground. You could pick up fruit and sell it and make a killing. You could pick up some fruit and make a juice, right? Like there's low-hanging fruit doesn't even describe what the West could do to stop the bleeding of all of this wasted money that we've talking about on bad policies at the beginning of the show. Low-hanging fruit doesn't begin to describe it. And yet they're saying we have to spend more money. We're behind the eight ball. Russia's going to get us. And it just seems like politics of fear. Stopping the illegals coming into the country would massively improve things. Healthcare, like it would stop the rapid decline where we are and maybe let us catch our breath and figure out a pathway out of it. But instead, they just keep piling on dirt, right? And the system is going to collapse. Here is EU talking about fear.
4 years ago, our member states, they were investing 218 billion in defense. And by this year, it's estimated to reach 392 billion. So in 4 years' time, it has been almost doubled how much member states are allocating now funding to defense. So our message is clear. Europe is stepping up. Europe is investing in its defense, and Europe will be ready to defend itself. 4 years ago, our member states, they were investing...
Right? So defense. We have to defend ourselves against those evil Ruskies. The Telegraph is reporting a free speech campaigner is bringing a legal claim against the Independent Office for Police Conduct, arguing its support, the police supporting Pride is a breach of its impartiality. I think that that's true. And I'll be interested to see if this goes through and what happens then. But yeah, when you've got police who are sporting all of these, Pride is not about inclusivity or anything like that. I really do think that Pride has been usurped by, I call them rainbow communists, but they're using it as a way of taking over places. And so when these guys deck themselves out like this, they say, we're aligned with these rainbow communists and all of the things that they stand for. And I think that that's probably incorrect. You should have like justice, it should be blind, right? If you broke the law, then you broke the law, and we're going to deal with that. We're not, if you broke the law and we ideologically agree with that, we're going to look the other way. That's not good and not the system that we think that we live in, but it is the system that we live in, unfortunately. Disclosed TV says Portuguese parliament bans the burqa in public spaces. Interesting. And do you support that? I remember that was a smear against Stephen Harper in 2014-15, that election, 2015 election. And so they were saying he's going to ban the burqa, he's going to ban the hijab, and isn't that bad? He's a terrible guy, and he's the reason this child washed up on the shore for some reason. And so they use smear campaigns. And so I found this tweet, and I thought this is a pretty fair tweet, I think, because what does blindly accepting a foreign culture look like? It looks like the erasure of your culture, right? Because people are demanding that other people accommodate their religion and their beliefs in public at all times. And that's, again, not the system we think we live in. Here's Louise. No, I'm not even saying it right. This lady, and Sinead candidate. She's a political candidate. I think she's maybe in Ireland, but maybe also Portugal. I'm not sure. She's speaking English, and I thought this was a good take. Here's what she says. On banning the burqa. 10 years ago, I would have been horrified, she says. 5 years ago, I would have been disappointed and seen it as punching down. Now, I unequivocally support the banning of the niqab and burqa in public in the West, and I would go further. I would ban the hijab on little girls. I do not accept the logic that covering is necessary because of men's unbridled sexual urges towards adult women. But as a tolerant liberal, I will live alongside this when it comes to adult human females. I do not accept that girls under the age of consent should in any way have to take responsibility for their sexual aggression of men. Never. In this regard, I do feel the rights of women and girls are universal insofar as I will not apply cultural relativism to this issue. Never. This is where I am afraid your cultural or religious values are trumped by the host country's normative views toward women's rights. Though you may argue you choose to cover, a child cannot choose and cannot consent, and therefore I will always advocate for them unequivocally. Yeah, I think that there's value in that. And again, not to say I was ever in favor of having burqas and niqabs and things like that, but I thought a ban was infringing on free speech, and I wasn't sure how you balance free speech with religious expression and potential turning of the culture, right? Like, I don't know how you balance that properly. Is a hijab ban or burqa ban, hijab, niqab ban, is that acceptable within the context of free speech? Is free speech absolutism? I think if you're absolute about free speech, it would include religious expression. So how do you balance that properly? And I don't know the right answer to that, but I find myself agreeing with a niqab and burqa ban to conserve the culture. And I think it's important to conserve the culture. So again, it's a balancing act, and I don't know how to strike the right balance properly, but I think there's something to it, to have culture as more important than somebody's religious expression, particularly a foreigner in our country visiting or living here for an extended period of time. That kind of expression can be destabilizing, and they know it, and that's why they do it, right? That's why they block the roads for prayer as well. It's not they got lost and thought it was a mosque, right? Like, that's not it. They're doing it for a reason, and there's a specific reason they're doing it. And so we should recognize that and not pretend that they're doing it for free speech absolutism. They're exploiting free speech absolutism to be able to push their religious agenda, and that's not good. And is that everybody? Probably not, right? Probably not. But if you believe in your religion enough, probably a lot of them, right? So again, it's a balancing act, and the right answer is, as always, elusive. You have to make up your own mind what you think, right? Lewis Blackpool says, a UK government department official profiled me to block a freedom of information request. I think this is probably happening in Canada. If you don't think this is happening in Canada, I got bad news for you, right? And so he says, it's 2 minutes, but they did not want me getting information to report to my viewers either. And I think that that's funny because I'm such a small podcast. You know, I've got like a couple thousand viewers a day. So how much damage could I really do? Right? It's super weird. If I don't have much reach, why do they care? You have to wonder. Here is this guy, and he's just outlining what's going on.
This is likely the first time this has ever happened to a journalist in the UK. Over the past year, I've been investigating how the Home Office works with NGOs and charities that influence asylum accommodation policy, such as who gets the contracts, who sits in the meetings, and who is really steering the agenda behind the scenes. And to get those answers, I use the Freedom of Information Act, which is a legal right every journalist and citizen has. And through that process, the Home Office disclosed a list of pro-migrant charities and law firms that had been holding roundtable meetings with officials. I published that information entirely lawfully, and I named the directors of the organisations, which is on public record. The Guardian then ran a piece, far-right influencer. They meant me. Even though it was disclosed through proper legal channels. And now the Home Office has refused my follow-up request for more details, not because the data doesn't exist, but because of me. They claimed releasing the information could cause, quote, public backlash, and that my social media activity posed a safety risk. That means a government department officially used my public profile as a reason to block transparency, the first case of its kind I've ever seen. Rupert Lowe, the MP for Great Yarmouth, has now written directly to the Home Secretary, demanding answers on who authorised this, why it happened, and whether officials are following any internal guidance that allows profiling of requesters. I've also filed a subject access request to see exactly what the Home Office holds on me and how my journalism was discussed behind closed doors. Even Elon Musk has now weighed in. A journalist can legally ask questions of their own government and be profiled for doing so.
Yep. Sure can be. So how safe and effective are these shots, did you say? Right? Oh, get that guy off YouTube right away. Yeah. Yep. If you ask the wrong question, you're done. That's the point. Here's Trump talking about Venezuelan submarines, Venezuelan drug submarines. Okay, Marco Rubio, Donald Trump. Here we go.
That was in a submarine, right? We attacked a submarine, and that was a drug-carrying submarine built specifically for the transportation of massive amounts of drugs, just so you understand. This was not an innocent group of people. I don't know too many people that have submarines, and that was an attack on a drug-carrying, loaded-up submarine. That was...
I don't know too many people who've got submarines, says Trump. But if anybody knew people with submarines, he'd probably be Trump, right? So not too many people have private submarines. Fair. That's a fair point. And if Venezuela's loading up submarines, like that's a pretty sophisticated operation, right? How much money in those drugs? Lots of money in the drugs. Cash says, breaking the alleged text messages showing possible CIA collusion between the CIA and Virginia Democrat governor candidate Abigail Spanberger. So that's interesting. And the text messages, and again, take it with a grain of salt. They say that this is legit and real, and it's got like, the phone number and stuff, but always take everything with a grain of salt. But huge breaking news. Alleged text messages show the CIA is colluding with Virginia Democratic governor candidate Spangler. The deep state is panicking. If authenticated, this is evidence of collusion. And so it's not authenticated yet. So again, take it with a grain of salt. But apparently Bill Barr is implicated as well. The text reads like this. I need to know how everything is for Friday. We need to have someone on the inside. We can't assume the campaign has already won. Everything has already been meticulously planned. Tell Bill Barr that everything is set. I will only believe it on Friday when I see it with my own eyes that everything went well and correctly. Comey is not at all happy with Spanberger's performance. She should be further ahead with all the money we invested in her. We should be doing better. We are expecting more results. Mary, there isn't much more I can do. Unfortunately, the Republicans are on the rise, and you know how people are idiots and always vote for monkeys out of pity. Relax, we're going to win. And she says, I'll only relax once we win. We can't afford to lose anymore. CIA has already invested a lot of money in Spanberger. This is not a joke. If she doesn't win, we won't be able to put our plan into action. Spanberger, what's that? Is that Portuguese? We won't be able to put our plan into action. And there are a lot of people in Virginia we need to put in jail. So do your job properly and make sure that on Friday everything goes as planned with Winsome. We need to take her out of the race. Everything is under control. Everything is under my control, she says. So maybe, if it's authenticated, if it's real, the iMessage leak is Photoshop fake. It's a fake. We'll see. Maybe it's a fake. There are all sorts of examples of criminality, and the CIA Whitmer kidnapping thing is one recent example. So I wouldn't put it past them. But again, take everything with a grain of salt. Everything I see, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe it's fake. Maybe it's real. I don't know. But oftentimes these days, real things, I mean, look at the whole COVID thing, right? Like when you look at that and you look at what people are talking about, the number of injuries, all sorts of problems, what Dr. O'Looney talks about with the white things in the autopsies, in the veins and stuff. All of these things paint a very concerning picture. And it seems like nobody cares, but like, is that real? Like, how real is that, right? And then I haven't seen it in person. I haven't like picked one up, but I've seen videos that look very convincing that's real. I believe it's real. And then, so like, similarly, how real is our vaccines are 100% safe and effective, and they totally saved everybody from COVID and, blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's real. That doesn't sound like a real thing, specifically and particularly when you apply it to COVID vaccines, but I think maybe also more broadly. I think there are medications that you can take that will help you. Like if you go to a climate that you're not used to. I went to Dominican Republic one time and I had to take some kind of medication to help with, was it hepatitis C or something like that? That was probably a vaccine, right? But there was another one as well. And there are other things that you take to prevent dengue fever and things like that you have to take before you go to like Africa or something like that. If you're going to do mission work in Africa, you have to take certain things. Or if you go to China and you've never been to China, you have to take certain things. And so there are some of these medications that I think are worthwhile, probably, right? But I haven't done the research into them. But if I did do the research into them, I feel like it would be big pharma loaded research on a Google machine. So like that's kind of hinky anyway. Like it'll tell me it's safe and effective and you definitely need it. But I think there's probably something to some medications. But all of these medications that we've got now, especially the mRNA vaccines and things like that, I've got questions about. But it's hard to verify. And when you find something that you're like, I think that's true, like I believe that's true, I think that there's enough evidence to back that up. But the world is behaving now. Like if I went out and asked my doctor, is the COVID vaccine safe and effective? He would say, yes, definitely. Do you want your booster? And if I said, are they finding white, like tubey things in veins and stuff? I don't think that the doctor would say, yes, they're finding white tubey things in the veins and blah, 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 blah. But I think that they are finding white tubey things in the veins. And I think that doctors are incentivized not to talk about that to people like me. And I think that we're in a situation where you can't be told the truth. You have to find the truth and come to the truth on your own. And I'm not advocating that you should believe this text message exchange. I'm just saying I like to look at and see all sorts of interesting stories. Any story that I find interesting, I'm going to look into because I think that it's interesting, and I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to tell you about it because I'm interested. And I think you'll be interested if I'm interested. And so some of them are interesting, and some of them are super like, wow, I can't believe that's going on. Like the white tubey things, right? I think that's true. And I think I understand why the press would be covering it up. I understand why the government would be covering it up. And so now I look and try and figure out like, why is all of this happening? And it's, I think, because of the corporate capture or the captured situation that allows the other side of this to pretend that the reality they're pushing forward, it's safe and effective, don't worry about it, go to sleep, is being utilized to just run roughshod over everybody. And so it's a weird situation, man. It's a weird thing. We're almost overloaded with information. Whereas in the 1960s, you'd have not enough information. You'd be like, I'm sure that, XYZ is true, but I can't prove it. I don't have the time to go down to Dallas and, like dig through the archives and map it all out. And, I just don't have the time, but I'm sure they're not telling us something. Whereas now it's like the Charlie Kirk thing, right? We have all these camera angles and there's all sorts of things. And like, it was the kid, it was that kid with the limp on the roof. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. 100%. Kid with the limp on the roof with the rifle and jumped off the roof. Okay. Got it. And there's no questioning that. And if you question that, you're a anti-Semite. It's weird. It's a weird situation, and it's a strange thing to navigate. So I'm not trying to lead you astray. I want you to come to the truth, whatever that is, on your own. And I am a harbinger, or I'm a curator of interesting stories, and that's truth, man. Whew. You got to make up your own mind on that one. Geiger says, fiscal year 2025 in the United States is now official. The U.S. ran a $1.7 trillion deficit. Nothing. No problem. Ain't no thing. What's the bill? How many bottles of wine did we order for dinner? Trillion? Total receipts, 5.235 trillion. Total out, 7.1 trillion, 7.01 trillion, excuse me. We spent more on interest payments on our national debt than the entire defense budget. So the U.S. is insolvent, but nobody seems to care. And again, there's reality for you, right? Like, okay, listen, we don't have any money. Our commitments are way more than what we're bringing in. But we've got potential and nobody's going to default on us yet. Okay, so everything's the same. Everything's the same. No problems. What's real? Like, are we broke or are we not broke? We're broke. We're broke, but not. And bringing in trillions in tariffs, right? For the United States anyway. In Canada, I think we're just broke. I think we're just broke. And the IMF is circling, waiting for their chance to take over. And what's his name? Oh my gosh. Jason Levine did a whole breakdown on what happened when the IMF took over Greece. And I thought it was a good breakdown, but I tagged it, and sometimes my tags don't work. So credit where it's due. When people do good work, that's good. So if you want to read what happened when the IMF took over Greece, have a look. But I mean, they got out of it. So it's not forever, I guess, but probably the United Nations digital prison will be forever. So it'll be IMF to United Nations digital prison. I hope I'm wrong about that. And that's enough of me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for your support, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I don't know about tomorrow's kitchen table talk. So I'm going to try and send an email later on today, but I don't know. I really don't know. So apologies. Stay tuned. Anyway, have a wonderful, wonderful day.